Welcome to What Juices You, where I ask leaders, I ask thought leaders, what juices you? What is it that you wake up in the morning, you don't have to fuel it, it fuels you? Today, I have the honor of interviewing Dr. John Todor. And John, neuropsychologist, you've been around the block, you've had a great career at HP. You've got some tools out there right now that are both bite-sized, but also more robust, and want to dive right in. One of the things that it's written everywhere in all that you do is the word vitality. Vitality matters to me because a company like Juice, vitality is that thing that energizes and fuels engagement and high performance. So we actually care a lot about our vitality as well. But you've got, I think, a really, really interesting lens around that. So with vitality, you've got resilience, you've got the adaptive hinge, you've got a whole bunch of stuff that I am just so excited. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So why is vitality so important to you? What is it that juices you about that so much?
So one of the things I've wrestled with in dealing with innovation and adaptation over the years is, I'll just back up. I've spent a lot of time consulting in the area of innovative change and disruptive change.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily what I dealt with was for people who were being disrupted, not the people who were creating the new paradigm. Okay?
Yeah.
So I understand what they wrestled with. And I also saw the anguish that they went through over time. And so what is it that got in the way of them being able to get beyond coping, doing a few fixes, to adapting and seeing new opportunities and change? Well, the bottom line for me became vitality. Okay. And so part of vitality is the ability to live a quality life physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially. And so if you have high vitality, then all of these things are firing together. And the key point today is that if you have low vitality, you're robbed of the ability to adapt to change. Okay, that's really key.
Yeah.
So in fact, what I call the vitality paradox is that basically modern life drains you of the very capabilities that it demands of you. That's a big deal. Okay. So I wake up every morning thinking about ways how I could take neuroscience and then translate them to everyday ways that people can prevent the loss of vitality or restore it, and thereby begin the path of being able to adapt, grow, and thrive in an uncertain world.
Yeah. When we were talking prior to hitting the record button here, I was just saying one of the things that I appreciate so much is it is clear that you've gone as far into complexity as anybody can go in the brain, but you have an ability to take that complexity and turn it into something so simple and so accessible and so relevant. And I know that we're going to get to the interior of the brain and the molecules and how one can use some of these tools, and you call the adaptive hinge. You've got a resilient brain program that we want to talk about. But one of the things that fired me up right off the bat was you talked about the rejuvenate your walk. So this is something a lot of us do, not everybody can, but a lot of us do every single day. And there's a way to do it less mindfully that actually doesn't serve us in nearly the ways that if just a minor modification that you're talking about can actually release a lot of benefits. Can you talk about rejuvenate your walk?
So there was a point where I was focusing on aging leaders and the dilemma that they have in trying to stay relevant and keep and get over the perception that they're not as quick in thinking and so forth. And part of that came down to this notion of physical vitality. And one of the dangers is you walk in a room, and if you're slightly hunched over and you have poor biomechanics, you're immediately perceived to be less with it. Okay. And there's a lot of truth to it. So I built a program to restore biomechanics so that you are now functioning in an optimal way, putting less stress on your joints so you could get all the cardiovascular benefits of it, but you also change your mental state. And this is a big
Hmm.
deal. So let me just say here's the mantra. And in my program, there's 8 steps to it. And it takes you through learning the new biomechanics. It's all done to music. They're audio tapes, or they go on for about 40 minutes, and you walk with them, and I periodically coach you. So and the mantra is this: head up, meaning pulling up straight up here, not chin up, head up. Okay, good
Hmm.
neck posture as opposed to the tilting
Hmm.
head.
Yep.
Eyes down the pathway. Okay, if
Yeah.
someone's walking 50 feet ahead of you, you should be looking at the top of their head, not the pathway down here.
Hmm.
Arms swinging from the shoulders.
Hmm.
Okay, and what that does is it reestablishes uh, basic reflexes that we thought were gone, but it allows you to get back into a proper biomechanics without someone going and saying, do this, do this, do this. Done.
Okay.
And
Okay. One
and it,
second. 1 second, John. Just 1 second. Here's,
yep,
I want you to coach me. So this is me.
yep.
Coach me into the
Okay.
worst possible
Okay.
position
The
possible.
worst, the worst, the worst possible position was without sitting down, start moving into a sitting position.
Okay.
Okay. Now try and walk. Now you see that
Okay.
and you say, "Oh, that's an 80-year-old man, and he's very pensive," and so forth. Now
Yeah.
pull your head up towards the sky, the ceiling,
Mhm.
top of your head up,
Yep.
okay,
Got
and
it.
look horizontal to the floor, up,
Okay.
eyes up, down the pathway,
Got it.
arms swinging from the shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
thumbs up, okay.
Okay.
Now, what am I? I'm standing now in an open posture, and there's a lot of research in cognitive psychology that says open postures open the mind. They make you more receptive to new experience and so
Yep.
forth. Okay,
Yep.
that's the key. And some people will get it almost immediately, and they'll say, "I almost feel like I'm gliding. It's changed the way I walk. There's no stress to it." But
Mm-hmm.
what will happen as you're walking? So during a walk, it could be 30 or 40 minutes long. When you're practicing this, you will periodically revert back to looking at the ground in front of you, tilting forward, and
Yeah.
assuming a more flexed position. And as soon
Yep.
as you do that, you do that because you've started ruminating.
Interesting.
You do that because you started ruminating again. You're starting to think
Mm-hmm.
about what I could have done, what's going to happen if I don't do something. So so the minute you say that, you thumbs up, head up, eyes down the shoulder. You repeat the mantra and you get into it. And you can't ruminate in that when you're doing that.
Fascinating.
You you cannot do that. I mean, you could try, but it's so much easier to notice what's around you, look down, and have this open frame of vision as well as thinking.
It feels to
So
me, John, like what you're unlocking here is a biomechanical hack that allows me to, as a beautiful course correction to, I'm starting to get into catastrophizing, ruminating, regret, whatever. And all I need to do is actually go to the body as opposed to try to go to work on my mind. And going to the body and how I'm walking actually is the hack that releases the right kind of thinking. Is that what you're saying?
yep, that's exactly right. It's a neuropsychological hack or a neurophysiological hack, and there's a number of other layers to it. There's one as I think like the seventh session in this. It has to do with walking meditation.
Mm,
Well, when you do that, and when you get into this and use the mantra that I'm doing, you're already in a meditative state. That's what it
yeah.
puts you in. But to go one step further, if you put your eyes into the upper visual field, so
Mm,
if you're looking at me now and I don't lift my head, I lift my eyes up slightly, so I'm in
yeah.
the upper visual field. Interesting thing. It inhibits the impact of the amygdala and other negative things in the way that they prevent your full executive functioning. That's a big deal.
Fascinating. It is a big deal.
Okay. That's a big deal. And so if you do it while you're walking, you have this opportunity to engage in free thinking. But you can use that simple hack of the upper visual field in other cases. So if you're sitting in your office and you're saying, man, I'm getting too wrapped around this issue, I need a fresh perspective, you can look out the window at a tree or whatever's out there. And instead of looking in normal horizontal ways, just shift your eyes up a little bit. And with practice, you will notice that it frees you to have more capacity to think about new things as opposed to the impingement of old thoughts.
John, you've probably seen the research around the placement of your computer, the camera in your computer, while you're in a virtual conversation. And you are more likable and more trustable if your eyes are looking up a little bit rather than so if your camera is actually placed a bit higher and you're like, so I've never connected what you just said with the placement. I just know that if the camera is a little bit higher and you're looking up into it, you're more trustable by people and you're more liked by people.
Right.
So I'm
Yeah.
almost wondering whether that almost suppression of the amygdala, so it's not getting fired up just by moving the gaze up, is connected with that. Would you?
Well, I'm sure it is. And I wasn't aware of that, but it makes sense to me since body language is communicated so fast and unconsciously that if I'm looking down, there's more likely that I'll be perceived as pensive and almost. And the flip side, if you're a little bit paranoid or expecting someone to be misleading you, is that there's a deviousness to it. But if I'm looking up, and the same with the open stance. There's this
Yeah.
perception that you're in a good. The open stance contributes to an upbeat, positive mood. So that's another part of the receptivity because we pick all that up real quickly.
Yeah. I just find this so fascinating and so helpful for a lot of reasons. But one is if I am ruminating and I become aware of that, one could say, okay, if this is the iceberg and I'm going to go way underneath the surface here and look at my beliefs and my narrative and my values and, really look at the interior. And that can take quite a bit of time. But what you're saying is no, actually, within 3 seconds or whatever, if you just correct this, you can actually address all that's happening in there immediately without doing all that deep interior work.
Right. And you can and to there's sort of two levels. There's the immediate impact that what you could have by what I call the vitality pause, which is an exercise to practice interrupting the rumination. Okay,
Okay.
so vitality pause could be as simple as
Walk me through one.
okay,
Walk me through one.
so we're talking now, and you may ask a question that gets me riled up a little bit or makes me
Yeah.
think where I don't have a complete answer. So
Hmm.
instead of trying to answer it and be reactive, I could stop and look out the window. And when I look out my window now, I look at a beautiful tree and the breeze is blowing the leaves, and
Hmm.
and I consciously look at something different. I don't just look at it and see green. I say, what am I noticing? And when I do that, what am I noticing? I can't ruminate. So
Yeah.
I immediately have a release. Okay. Now, how long that lasts becomes a function of practice and how you get to over how many of these you insert in your daily life.
So, John, you're looking out your window at a tree, and I am doing the same thing,
Okay.
and I'm noticing different different shades of green. I'm noticing different textures. And I think what you're saying is, as I'm actually turning my attention and noticing those things, there's something benevolent about that interrupt. So this vitality pause that you're talking about, give me more about that because I'm
Okay.
in a meeting and I've got like a whole bunch of things that some of them
Yeah.
got resolved, some of them didn't. So how do I use that?
So we have a lot of people experience what would be considered chronic stress, chronic issues that go on day to day. Okay, they accumulate through the day, they sleep, they should be rested, they got new energy, but mentally they're still trapped in with the stuff that's been dragging on unresolved.
Yes.
And there are a lot of reasons why it's difficult to interrupt them. And one of the things that we lose is the agency or the capacity to mentally say, stop.
Yes.
Okay. You go in there
Yes.
and say, okay, I don't want you doing this little loopy anymore. Okay. You can
Right.
say that. And there are a lot of therapists will tell you can do it. It's really difficult. And if you can do it, you probably didn't have the problem to start with. Okay. So now what we do is we have a vitality pause. And the vitality
Okay.
pause has a number of elements to it. The
Yeah.
immediate thing is that I look out at the trees. And if I just do that literally, I may not see anything. But the act of forcing myself to notice the leaves moving in a soft way, not in an analytical way, but in a soft way, I am taking in new sensory information. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, you're walking out of a meeting and you have a
Mhm.
pause at the threshold of the door.
Yep.
And you may do something. You may actually touch the wall, but you consciously create these little examples for yourself. So what happens? You now force yourself to do a soft switch to pay attention to something else. And it usually is sensory and it brings in input. Now, why is this important? Because
Yeah.
when you ruminate, this could go off in a little bit of a tangent, but when you ruminate, what happens is the mind shuts down sensory input.
Mm.
Okay. You actually inhibit your sense of interoception in the body and extroception. So
I did not know
in the
that.
long run, in the long way, you are not getting more information in. You are only can focus on what you already have in the frame. And so
Mhm.
you have narrow and rigid thinking. So you can loop around narrow and rigid thinking and never find an answer because the answer is out here.
Yes.
Okay, it's in a new space, in a new reality, and some new algorithm that makes sense. So if you want to make sense of it, you have to gather, systematically open your mind. So so it'll happen. You can make this happen in an instance with the vitality pause by just building into your life. Okay. But you also, while you're doing is you're doing a neuropsychological exercise to get better so that you can volitionally do it. That's where you want to get to. You want to say, "Hey, you can't trick me into ruminating. I already figured out how I can interrupt you because you're practicing a pattern, a neural pattern, and patterns. The more you practice them, the better they become. The
Yeah.
flip side is when you ruminate, you're practicing a neural pattern.
Mm.
So we're
Yeah.
working. We have to get. That's why I say everyday ways. So here's another little thing: the phone rings,
Yeah.
distraction. No, no phone. Oh, well, how's that tree doing? I don't answer the phone till the third ring. Okay, so you're now exerting your will on the things that
Interesting.
are impacting you.
Interesting. So that's like bicep curls for my agency. That's what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so you can carry it on to a vitality pauses can not only be mental. A pause could be you stand up.
Hmm.
You don't have time for the walk, so you stand up and you do a stretch. You're now at one level. What you're saying is I'm standing up and stretching. What I'm thinking is also at the same time is you are exerting your influence on your mental state because you are now taking control of it, and that over time builds the agency where you now get back in control. You have the
Yeah.
ability to not live in the past and worry about the future, but to actually take action. So the whole point of this whole series of very short videos is for people to find ones that resonate with them in their
Mhm.
context and that they'll start doing. And the feedback I get is, well, I took that one you looked at glitters and here's my example and I do this. And so they go on. Okay. So in some cases, a vitality pause or an experience that I use to reinforce the flip, not going one step further, not just interrupting and taking control. And what I've called the adaptive hinge is a while back I videoed a goose walking on land, which is kind of an awkward struggle,
Yeah.
sort of thing. You're watching it, and it walks into the water, and there's a moment that he floats. That moment is magic to me, and I
Yeah.
can replay that magical moment. That's the hinge flipping. So I encourage people to either come up with their own goose or use the goose analogy, and it's in at least one of the videos. Or you could come up with other ones. You could see videos, you can find them where there's a little drop of water running down a leaf and it's going slow, and you're going, oh God, agony, and then it drops free. That freedom is felt. Okay, when you feel that, you in fact have opened your mind and allowed yourself to extend that period, but to go further. You're not just interrupting the time, you're actually opening your mind to be able to process new stuff.
Yeah. John, you and I have both been around long enough to know that there was a time where management consultants were helping people focus more, right? And so we need you to just focus harder. And that's the key. The ninja business people are the ones who could really be super, super focused. And so there's a little bit of white knuckling there, right? Over trying. And it feels to me like what you're saying is a lot of the innovations, a lot of the adaptive responses are in the soft focus, not the hard focus. And it feels to me also like if I was to start to put several things together that you're talking about, so just take the vitality pause and say, yeah, I'm not just going to stand up, although that has huge merit, but I'm actually going to go out and I'm going to walk with all of that posture you talked about. And by the way, I'm going to add some nature into there. The chance of me getting into a soft focus that actually invites possibility and innovation and novel recombinations of knowledge, I've just upped the chances by 10 times. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah. So we rewarded people who grinders, perseverance,
Yeah.
stick on the problem. And what happens is you build a downward spiral. Okay,
Yes.
so you're now burning energy. That's really hard work, and staying at it forces you to grind and, in fact, become narrower in your thinking. And the narrower
Yes.
you get into thinking, the more you're going to miss good information that it could solve the problem. But if the problem's outside of your frame, you can't consider them. So this notion that I'm talking about sounds soft when you've been to business school and they tell you that there's times you just got to grind. Okay, it sounds soft, but it's a reality. I mean, so let's back a little bit away. There's two mutually exclusive types of thinking. One is
Yeah.
convergence, and
Yeah.
convergence is we know the facts. We just got to find a better solution. So this could be
Hmm.
operational thinking, okay, where you're trying to get efficiency. That's so now you're focused on that, okay? And even that, the longer you focus, the less productive you're going to be if you don't refresh and allow your capacity, your mental capacity to come back up. Okay, so
For
what is
sure.
this mental capacity? You have a finite amount of capacity in optimal conditions to be able to push new ideas together
Hmm.
and keep them alive simultaneously so you can begin seeing a solution.
Yeah.
Okay. When you grind, you reduce the size of that capacity. So pretty soon you become narrower and narrower, and one thought comes and you say, that won't work. That won't work. But by
Yeah.
seeing a number of them come together, you can start seeing a solution. So convergence, there's a problem there. And that's convergence is what a lot of business is about. It's not bad. Then the other side is divergent thinking, where you say, things don't fit. I need to find, and you've used the term ambiguity or uncertainty
Yeah.
or chaos.
Yep.
Okay. So now you need to gather lots of new information. So you need to open your systems. We just talked about the pause could do that. Nature can do
Mm-hmm.
that. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
other things can do that. Okay. So you now, and at the same time, what you've done is reduce rumination. So you now have the full mental capacity. And
Yep.
where you're trying to get to is to use what I've called generative neuroplasticity. Now, it sounds complicated. So neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to rewire itself. And the
Right.
simplest rule is things that are repeated get stronger networks,
Yes.
including rumination and stress and all
Yeah.
this cluster.
Yeah.
Okay. Cluster starts. So one thing triggers it. That's why we have so much burnout and all this other stuff. The other side, that's just repetitive stuff out of your control, someone else doing it to you. Generative neuroplasticity is where you have all these loose things that don't fit. They're contradictions to your old mental model.
Right.
You can hold them simultaneously up here long enough for your force closure to happen around the new ideas, and you see a new thought. And sometimes you'll see it and it disappears. Okay, well, so you go through this process again. You can't do that very well if anything has robbed you of vitality. You need
I agree.
full vitality. You can't
I
do it.
agree.
And this generative capacity is really the secret sauce to any business leader now. That's what they have to do. They have to
They
constantly
do.
find outliers or contradictions. Okay.
Yes.
The bad news is it takes a lot of effort,
Mm-hmm.
and as opposed to finding quick solutions. And it takes practice. And we're not good at it because there's all these external things that rob us of its ability. Okay. And the other thing is that there's as you know, and this may not apply to leaders, but as you know, there are a lot of people that were never good at this at any state, let
Yeah.
alone under stressful circumstances. So my advice is business leaders absolutely need to work at this capacity that I'm talking about, this generative neuroplasticity. Okay. But they need to encourage it in every one of the people in their team, in their organization. Why? Because you can't come up with a new idea and get an organization that is rigid to absorb it. So over time, you both hire for people that are naturally this way, and you build it and you facilitate and create a culture where they in fact are encouraged to engage in it. And so that
Mm-hmm.
not only can you come up with the great idea, they're the ones that implement it into every step of your organization, so it's whole and it happens over with much less pain. And we could
Yeah. It
probably
feels to me
generate. Go ahead.
when I have seen leaders make those novel recombinations that add tremendous value, like almost exponential value, and to our listeners, the fun and the laughter and the raucous, the circus, but we're not signing up for that anymore. Shipping animals around, animal rights gone. And then the artistic, beautiful sophistication of the theater, but not everybody can access that. And so somebody takes those two things, happens to be a Canadian, Guy Laliberté, and he looks at that and goes, oh, an unforgettable experience that is fun and full of laughter and full of artistic sophistication. Well, that's Cirque du Soleil. So, and that's billions and billions of dollars. And so putting two things together that were
Right.
disparate and seemed to be disconnected. Well, here's what I've seen, that those combinations of those two things, you were saying, they can be disparate. They can even be somewhat antagonistic to each other or in tension. I don't see them ever coming together through exertion and grit. And it's like, we're going to force those things together. There's some sort of playfulness and a very soft focus that actually those things kind of almost couple together, not magically. And so you say it takes effort, but I think the effort is to be able to have the hygiene to get yourself into that state.
By
And to
effort, it's not the push. Okay.
yes.
It's not the grind. which is
That's
what
it.
we often think is happening. I'm talking about this finite mental capacity to boost neurons to fire together. Okay, and
Yeah.
you only don't know how that happens, but the idea is that there's now some thoughts where you want to get a recombination of things that were not previously integrated, and that mental effort gets depleted under modern life. Okay, in modern
For
life.
sure.
So just to follow on and reiterate this, it's one thing to create Cirque du Soleil and the artistry and the whole magic of it, and have it in your head. But if everyone that participates in it doesn't internalize it and re-express it through their own generative capacity in the role that they play, it is
Mhm.
not magical. It's kind of you can notice it when it doesn't happen. There are people that are executing, but they're not part of the big composition. And so that same thing happens in organizations. And you
Yeah.
probably can come up with a ton of examples, but years ago I was with a company that was trying to put in an early version of CRM. And I revisited them 4 years later, and they were still struggling with people to figure out how it actually was advantageous to them. The
Wow.
sales guy saw it as Big Brother looking over the shoulder. They didn't they
Yeah.
didn't get it. And then a guy going, I
Yeah.
don't get it. I spend millions of bucks on this system, and we can't, and how many training sessions and all this stuff. You have to the person, if you want to change and you want people to create a function under a new set of rules, a new mental model of how things work, that has to be theirs. And the
Yeah.
way they will get it, I can get it from you. I can understand. I'd never seen Cirque du Soleil expressed that way, but I get it now. Okay, so that's a new
Yeah.
fusion, and the more, but I have to, but that's because I do generative neuroplasticity every day.
Sure.
Okay, so how do you do it? So simple way, everyday way, you cook without a recipe. I
Hmm.
mean, literally, you go in and you say, what would happen if I combine these things? It's an
Yeah.
experiment, an exploration. It's novel. Okay. The other thing you do is you seek out novelty. So you have new things that are happening, but they're not within your frame. And so at some point in time, there is a component of that fuses with a component of this, and that's where you get real innovation and clear new thinking. Okay, so you can create a whole list of those. So create new friends, talk to different people, go on different topics, so forth.
Yeah.
So
I, it's taken for me right down to I started putting my left leg into my trousers first. And for
yeah,
68 years or whatever, since I've been dressing myself, I've been putting my right leg in first. When I go for a walk, I always go to the left out of my house and say, I've started going to the right. And just looking for novel, there's nothing the matter with tradition, nothing the matter inherently with routine, but I've been seeking out novelty and to see what that changes in terms
right.
of soft focus, in terms of novel recombinations. And I've really been finding that fascinating.
So novelty, you said, or I think you used the word playfulness.
Hmm.
Okay, well, novelty is related. Okay, and so the notion of playfulness is that you start. That's sort of a level step where you're taking novelty and putting it together. And so it is a
Yeah,
generative kind of activity if you do enough. So the key to take away is that if you can put yourself in a situation where you initiate and explore. So when I use the word cooking without a recipe, I don't I that could apply to all kinds of things that you're doing. But I'm actually a cook and I cook without recipes. Recipes are inspiration, and then I come away and say, "Oh, I got a better version of that. It needed a little more of this and a little bit of that," and I fail a lot, but I
yeah,
learn. I'm like the everyone's grandma that doesn't have a recipe. It's a little of this. I feel it. I do
sure.
this. Okay. So that's the behavior that you build into your life. And by the way, it becomes fun. It's an enjoyable way to experience your life. Not if you're worried about problem A, B, C, or D. because you don't have time for this freedom to initiate and explore. So you have to
Yeah.
get rid of that stuff first.
You know, it feels to me like the application for this for a manager or leader, they're myriad. And so a meeting is a meal basically, and a manager either has a recipe and off, who could argue with, we're going to do some pre-reading and some pre-work, and there's going to be an agenda, and here are the outcomes we're looking for, and we have a methodology for how we. But you could also have still outcomes and agenda, and you could really mix up the recipe, if you will, that's coming out of your mind of how you're going to do a meeting, which could be incredibly energizing for the people who need to sit through your meetings.
Well, and it relates to something you talked about, leadership styles that are parenting or partnering. And
Yes.
so you're really now talking about partnering, okay?
Yeah.
And earlier we had talked about, what happens when a depleted leader comes into a room. Well, what happens is before anyone says anything, before they even have a thought, they perceive someone who's tense, stressed, and reactive. Okay,
Yes.
so how could you turn that around? I mean, the leader's there because they've been carrying this stuff over and dealing with what they should do. They should be doing the walk program. They should be doing other things that make them more adaptive. But in that circumstance, the
Yeah.
leader would be much better off to take a piece of paper and just randomly put the outliers and the bugaboos that are not coming together on the paper, not try and structure it, not try and guide it, designate a facilitator and say, I want you to do a SWOT meeting as wide ranging as possible around these issues,
Yeah.
and then go for your walk. And when you come back and see the results, you are going to see them in a very, very different light. But you have actually partnered and encouraged your team to be generative,
Yeah.
to generate, not just to sort of look for the answer and find closure quickly.
Yeah. John, I don't want to leave without us talking a little bit about your resilient brain program. You do a lot of things. You've got a YouTube channel where you really chunk down some of these behaviors and activities just so simply and beautiful. And I hope people go there. But I really want you to talk a little bit about what is it that people experience in your Resilient Brain program. When they walk away, they go back to work and they give you some feedback a month later. What are people saying? And what is it that you've done with them that creates those types of results? Talk
Okay.
to us about that.
Okay. So the premise of it is that I'm now a coach and I use my background in neuroscience and neuropsychology to come up with what you called earlier hacks, like the walking program is a hack to do this.
Sure.
So there are a number of levels, but as in many things, you can't partition and keep them all separate. So the first level is you need to recognize the things that rob you of vitality
Yep.
and have a simple, everyday way solution and put it in your life. So I could write out a set of instructions for you that said that here at 9 o'clock or whatever time you start your day, you do this for 60 minutes, and then you do this and you do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you won't adhere to it. But if
No.
I teach you how to fish by showing you how they work together, and you select and you integrate them into your daily life so that you're automatically doing the pauses at the frame between things and so forth, you won't even notice it. So that's the first level. The
Yeah.
second level is to overcome um, the negative impact of modern life on the way our brain functions, the way it robs us of vitality, and it particularly robs us of the capacity to do open, fresh thinking.
Yeah,
Okay,
this is
so
interesting.
so
Okay.
the first step in that is to rejuvenate sensory input. Okay,
Hmm.
and there are a number of things that go with that. So from a neuroscience standpoint, some of the thing that really hit this home for me was about people were doing neuroimaging studies and looking at this, and you would do this task, and they would analyze what changed. And they found that in the period between doing the tasks, there were some patterns that came out.
Mm.
And the patterns were called the default mode network. Okay, so what you did,
Right.
and normal people, what happens is the default mode network is full of rumination.
Yeah.
Okay, not so in meditators.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, and 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 then down the road a bit, somebody says, and what happens when it's full of rumination? Well, what happens is it suppresses sensory input.
Right.
So it robs. So I turn it around and say, how do you override that? How do you get back to the point where you have a full deck of cards to play the game as opposed to too narrow a set? So you begin doing things that are an extension of the vitality pause. You savor in every
Right.
dimension you can. Okay. So you get a cup of coffee. How many times have you said, did I finish it already? Okay. As opposed to getting the cup, filling the cup, looking for steam, whatever dimension in it, you fully attend to it. Not because it's going to it may make the coffee and the experience better, but you're exercising a capacity in the brain that you need to be extremely good at. So you can put that
Mm.
in any number of things. Okay. Another
Yeah.
example, I have a routine. I go into a hot tub before I go to bed every night. And I could walk out there and I could just say, I'm going to just plop in and let the warm water do its magic. But as I walk to it, and then I put my feet in, I don't get all the way in. I feel the contrast
Ah,
between
yeah.
my feet and the rest of my body. Okay. And then I listen, I'm sitting in there and I get in a relaxed state. And in my case, I have an owl that lives in a tree close by. And once I get to a certain point, I listen intensely to the owl. Almost it's like a music thing. I mean, it's almost every night. So it's
Wow.
changing the way I could have just gone there and say, and if you just sit in it, you're going to be fighting ruminating thoughts,
Yeah.
past whatever, and you're going to keep this hyped up stress and you're a negative situation. So that's the second stage. Okay, so and they start happening together the more you progress. The third
Mm.
one is to work on inhibitory capabilities. And some of these you've
Okay.
already talked about. The adaptive pause has inhibition in it, but there's a whole sequence of things that we can do where you learn to actually interrupt old thought processes and become more open-minded. And part
Yep.
of it is an everyday way of doing what deep meditators do, and you get yourself in a place where you have soft fascination and your mind learns to wander in a productive way. Okay. So some of
Hmm.
that nature helps, walks help, a whole bunch of things. So you engage in exercises that do that. And you don't just do them for because I said this week you're going to go out and find several ways to do that. You do that, this becomes a habit of life where you take time. And when you do it, you'll
Yeah.
find that those are actually very pleasurable experiences once you're free of the nagging thing that I have to do to solve this problem. So the
Hmm.
next level, then now we have to go to adaptive flexibility. And adaptive
Mm.
flexibility is this notion of fusion that we were talking about of disparate
Yep.
ideas. And this is a combination of divergent thinking and convergent thinking because you can't
Mhm.
just have we have lots of people that can come up with crazy and wild ideas that are totally impractical.
Yep.
You now need and those don't happen together, but they happen in a multitasking way, and they don't happen always when you want them to. Sometimes you'll go through and you go through the divergent thinking and the soft fascination, and in the middle of the night you go it's fused. Okay, so you
Mhm.
want to recognize what it is that you do systematically to make it more likely that it'll happen for you. And I provide some examples and some guidance, and I have some sort of ways that are almost certain that it's going to happen and you'll have the experience, then you figure out other ones. So,
Yeah.
so one of the examples that I encourage people to do is you have a thorny issue that you're dealing with. You're being your business model's being threatened, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I want to think about it. So in my case, I live about 20 miles out of San Francisco. I could drive there. Instead, I get on BART, which is a rapid transit, so I'm not doing anything else. And I go through my notes about what the issues are. Okay, I look at them, and when I get off BART, I put those away, and I get on a ferry. And I go out in the bay, and I go across the bay. And when I'm on there, I am in soft fascination.
I bet.
Okay. And when I get to the other side, I might get off and have lunch or whatever else. And on the way back, I I start thinking about the fusion. I start pushing these various ideas together. They don't always fuse at that point, but you see
Hmm.
where I'm going. I have a systematic process that I do, but and it doesn't. Not everybody has San Francisco Bay to do that on, but you have other
Right.
things. You come up with your own, and you find that you might go back and say, "I'm going to go through that." Just it, because over time you find that that is freeing and inspiring for you,
Right.
and at the same time it's an exercise that puts you in a situation where you have, it doesn't matter what you're trying to resolve. So that's that's an example of so that's the section of sort of adaptive flexibility, and then the highest level is making sense
Mm.
and seeing opportunities. So now you have it, it's much more applied to your reality or your business model. But at some point, you need to make sense and see opportunity in the change and the new model of thinking. And that
Yeah.
sense making is in the way that I present it. There's a systematic process, and some of it is you gather the tools that help you do it more to gather the information and look for fusion.
Hmm.
You gather the tools that make sense for you cognitively, okay, and you start using them. And a simple example would be that you use um, what's the term? Well, Google Alerts. Okay, so you want to gather a lot of information. So you see a lot of it. You get stuff. So you put a term in it, stress. Well, you get a lot of stuff that's irrelevant, but you start
Yeah.
spotting. You quickly do it. Well, even a more modern way would be to, as you see issues and terms that are contradictions to your model, they're outliers,
Mhm.
they're threats. Okay, you feed them into AI. And you say, "Give me some ideas on how this might relate to this." Okay, and it
Right.
does. And so, if you've experienced with it, you know that sometimes it goes way different directions than you were going to go,
Yep.
and you
Yep.
go, "No, sorry, try again," or you go, "Wait a second, what's the logic in that?" And
Right.
sometimes you'll find that the logic in it is not particularly or directly relevant to the way you want to see the problem, but it's interesting. And you say,
Yeah.
okay, now you start expanding the scope of the way you're considering solving the disruptive change that was in there. So that's the
Yes.
hierarchy. Okay. And it happens, there are examples of things that they're not steps, it's not a lockstep process, it is
No.
systematically moves towards it, because if you're not doing the first ones, you can't certainly do the top sense making. But you'll be doing this if one of the requirements is to do the rejuvenate your walk program. So you already are doing 3 steps.
Right.
Another one is to adopt some sort of meditation, because within
Hmm.
that there are there are exercises. Okay, the exercise. I mean, any meditation, there is doing it, and then there is falling off the wagon. So you're doing sata nama, and you're trying to keep your focus on this deal here, and you fall off. Falling off is good because it means you have to learn to get back up, and that's
Yeah.
reality. Okay, so you
Yeah.
exercise that mental muscle. So, not to mention that if you say, okay, now the benefit is that I've reduced the potential rumination because I can control it, and that that's what this whole notion of the default mode network stuff is. So
Yeah.
that's the nature of it, and it's a highly participatory way of doing it, and it's usually a very small group of about 10 people,
Hmm.
and typically I create partners.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
Okay,
sense.
so there's a so we talk about an issue and an assignment and an exercise you're going to do, and then midweek you have a short call with your partner, and you tell your partner how it's going for you and what you're doing. And the partner says, "Geez, I didn't see it that way. That's
Mhm.
rich." Or what are you doing, and so forth. So this puts the onus back on the individual to find
Sure.
their way of incorporating it into their life. So that's the underlying model behind it.
Yeah. And does this happen virtually, John? Is it in person? Is it either?
It happens virtually. Yeah, that's
I
the
see.
model is virtual, and there's some reporting that goes in along the way, and it's used to extend it. It pretty much has to be virtual because the exercises take time and the
Sure.
experiences take time, and so uh, but the way I've set it up is that you have things that you would do that take a week before we come back and move on to something else. But we always look at what you've been doing for that week, and a week is arbitrary, but it's something that's manageable for most people.
Yeah, it's a drip fed process that
Yeah,
allows the cadence allows again metabolization, and it's
right,
like I know I've now integrated something into
right.
my behavior patterns.
And
Yeah,
the in an ideal circumstance, what you do in week one, you continue to do, and it becomes part of you. And week two, and then pretty soon you start saying, Man, I'm in a different environment. I'm on a business trip or something. My normal things are I can regenerate a process for me to do this. This is how I live now.
hmm.
This is
You
my
started off with the word vitality and why that was so important to you, and I think that the kind of toxic environment that we now find ourselves in uh, has vitality is basically the solution to that, but to what end? And I think that to what end is more innovation, more adaptive leadership. You're talking about things, pretty groundbreaking combinations, fusions that will create significant value for people in their individual lives, but also in their communities, in their organizations. So, is that the big output that you're looking for, John?
well, that I struggle with it applying what I'm doing to two audiences. Okay, the business world,
Yeah,
and that's primarily, and it has a lot to do with adaptation and seeing new opportunities and being able to
sure.
move towards them. Um, but part of vitality is having the vigor, liveliness, joy to live your life to the fullest. Okay,
Yeah,
and that applies to individuals, but it applies to businesses because one of the hot topics in business is burnout. Burnout is like no vitality. Okay,
yep.
zero. Okay, I mean, I have a diagram that I really like, and it takes a twist on Sisyphus pushing a rock up the hill. Okay,
Okay.
so the where the majority of people are is they're pushing the rock up the hill, and they're devising coping strategies, but they're not getting to the thriving one where you're holding the rock above your head. Thriving is where you now actually make it a good thing, and it doesn't just keep coming back on you because you fixed one little thing. And the lowest level is being overwhelmed by the rock sitting on you, and
Yeah.
that's burnout. Okay, so there's a whole sequence here that applies to to everyone. I mean, there's an inordinate number of leaders who are burning out. If you listen to McKinsey and some of these people, it's
Yeah.
30, 40%. And
Yeah.
so it's high. So building your vitality and restoring balance in your life and the capacity to take control of it, it doesn't push you to a one-sided way of coping constantly and the urgency of solving a problem that's sort of a fix but not a solution, and that whole struggle which you see in organizations so much. So it's both a consequence for a good life and a healthy life, because people with high vitality are optimistic and a whole range of things along that line that are good for
Hmm.
their health. But they also can face life without this notion of, oh God, what happened here? Why did they change the operating system on my phone? I had it all figured out what I could do, and
Yeah.
uh, so that's the concept of vitality. And so you asked earlier, what do they say after they embrace it? Well, even when you
Yeah.
begin embracing this notion that I want to boost my vitality in every dimension, okay,
Yeah.
physical, mental, emotional, and social, all of those have value to you as a business person, and they have enormous value to you as from a comprehensive well-being. So once you experience them, you start saying, I love it. I got you put a smile on your face.
Yeah.
Uh,
John, I want people to know where to get a hold of your Resilient Brain program. I want them to know how to get a hold of your YouTube videos that really break things down. You got a bunch of stuff out there that I hope that people really gain access to. So where do they find you?
Okay, so I have a couple of links to my website, and the simplest one is johntodor.com. So my last name is spelled Todor. So just johntodor.com, and that'll take you to the website, which has the links to the YouTube channel, to the
Hmm.
walk program, which
Hmm.
which you can do separately from, and the Resilient Brain program. Okay. The Resilient Brain program, right where it's at now, is I'm doing it on a one-on-one basis, and I'm about to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And early in the fall, I'm going to offer a beta version of it. And so if people go on and look at what the structure is, what I invite them to do is to have a free consultation with me where we talk about what they saw as a potential value in that kind of a program, answer their questions, and then we can mutually decide whether it's a good place for them to go. And so I'm going to be somewhat selective for the first group. So that's basically, it's all on the website. The YouTube channel, if you just go into YouTube and Google everyday ways to vitality, then it'll come up in there. And
Mm.
what they are is I try to keep them 1 minute or less. They're little
Yeah.
videos, and they're kind of hard hitting, and usually have a call to action. And in most cases, people say, I kind of knew that. I want that. And that's the whole, and it's doable. Okay. They're
Yeah.
doable right now. So that's a way to get
Yeah.
started.
I love that. John, it's interesting. I'm not pretending to know your age, and but I know that we're probably in the same cohort. And what I do find is that there are a lot of people in our cohort whose passion has cooled, and maybe even kind of turned into magna. Uh, but all the sparks and all the passion is still hot for you, and it's really endearing. It's very magnetic, and so I just want to say that I see that. I want to say that I value that, and I think a lot of our listeners and viewers will value that as well. There's a little boy inside you
Yeah.
that is really coming out with excitement about the world needing to see this stuff, and it's very, very beautiful. So I just want to say that it really comes across in a
I
charming way.
appreciate that, and I feel it. Okay, I mean, as this started to gel, um, and there was I went on a couple of years ago. I decided that the social media stuff was a struggle. I wasn't getting the following that I needed. I wasn't getting the
Yeah,
reaction from it and so forth. So I went on a digital retreat for a week. I went up in the mountains and just spent time in nature and didn't
yeah,
think about any of this. And on the way back, I said, "What's wrong with the way I'm approaching this? I mean, I have good content. Wow, this is all a good idea. Why aren't people embracing it?" And that's when I came up with this notion of doing this YouTube channel where I'm going
yeah,
to essentially set up a free platform for people to put their toes in the water,
yeah,
experience, and then they can begin to learn about that I'm authentic, and that I actually, when I say I'm bringing neuroscience, I am bringing neuroscience, and have the background to not just second bring it over from someone else's posting,
sure, yeah,
and so forth. So when I started doing it, and I realized after I figured out technically how to do it and everything, and I started getting reactions from, I sent out announcements to friends and family, and and it spread a little bit from there.
yeah,
And the reactions were so positive, but that I even felt like I was, this notion of the little boy tinkering and getting things. I felt it really energized me, and I believe that that's the message that I want people to take away. That if they regain the capability of adapting and growing in a changing world, they can experience thriving and experience it as a positive, as opposed to the, oh, too much change too fast, burnout, leave me alone, I wish I could give up. So that's the message.
oh
And
man. Yeah, I think if Albert was here with us right now, he would see you as that little boy riding a beam of light, and and saying, "There's a theory of relativity that's got to come to the world through your work that can be a bit of a game changer. It's very, very different than all things Newtonian, and everything works like a clock. What you're bringing is something that has high connectivity. It's incredibly organic. I mean, we didn't even talk about the release of BDNF, the miracle growth for the brain, and you're all over that and how people can do that. So there's just so much there that if people dig into your world, they're going to get massive value. So I just want to thank you, John, for taking the
well,
time to
thank
be
you.
with
I
us
appreciate
today.
the opportunity, and for doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all the best to you on your journey, and I just hope that you just go to the world with this stuff.
Thank you.